Hey guys, welcome back to Intelligent Faith 315. My name is Pastor Jay. I'm the host of the website here. If you are watching this video perhaps on our YouTube channel, we have about 50-something subscribers there. I do encourage you to go over to intelligentfaith315.com, our mother website, and just open that up and you'll find a lot more content there in terms of articles, other videos, links, other sites, etc. Just for you to check out, get involved in. If you're a skeptic or an atheist, a lot more material for you to try to poke holes into, etc. But do encourage you to check out both our YouTube channel. If perhaps you're on the Intelligent Faith 315 website, jump over to our YouTube channel. Or if you're on the channel, jump over to the mother website, just so you can get an exposure of all of the stuff that we offer here. Well, today's going to be kind of a little bit different. We're doing numerous series that are ongoing right now. We're trying to link you guys to some of the best Christian thinkers that there are really today. Dr. William Lane Craig, Dr. J.P. Moreland, Ravi Zacharias, Norman Geisler, Phil Fernandez, Dr. Alvin Planting, and so forth. And so that definitely is a function that we want to perform here at Intelligent Faith 315, is to help you as a believer, as a Christian if you are, get in touch with some of the best Christian thinkers in the area. Or of course, if you're not a believer, if you're a skeptic or hopefully a seeker of truth, of information, to really know what Christianity is about and what the Christian worldview really is. Also to connect you with some of the best ambassadors and kind of intellectual voices of the Christian worldview and faith. And then you can just make your own decision as to whether the Christian worldview is comprehensive enough for you to perhaps give up your old worldview and buy into the Christian worldview and faith. But today's going to be a little bit different than that. We do perform that function, but we also try to publish some of our own original content to try to speak to you guys at kind of a common peer level. And today, something was in my mind, something was kind of on my heart to do, and something just very, very simple. I noticed that we do have quite a lot of atheistic or naturalistic, materialistic viewers on YouTube. Out of the 53 subscribers we have on the channel, there's probably, the majority of them don't hold to the Christian worldview, and that's great. We're so glad you guys are here, especially my friend down in Australia or New Zealand, DanMill23. Hope you're still around checking videos out. And just any of you who just happen to browse by our website or YouTube channel, we're glad you're here, especially if you do not hold to the Christian worldview, the Christian philosophy, the Christian faith. But today I did want to do something especially for those of you in our audience who are atheists, who are naturalists or materialists. I wanted to give you an invitation to our atheist viewers, comrades, friends, to try to answer for us and to us here on our YouTube channel or on the website, because we'll be posting it over there as well. What would your answer be from the atheistic worldview, the naturalistic, materialistic worldview, to about 18 fundamental questions of human experience? Now, the reason why this, just kind of has been working in my mind is for this basic, simple reason. A worldview is supposed to be precisely that. It's supposed to be a view of the world. So it should be something that has a lot of explanatory power. In other words, power and profundity in terms of explaining the features of reality as we see them, but also explanatory scope. In other words, it should have not just depth, but width, and should be able to explain all of, or the vast majority of human experience as we know it. And to me, the atheistic worldview, and by that I also mean secular humanism, naturalism, materialism, the scientific supposed backbone of that, which would be Darwinian evolution, I really think as a worldview is very weak, it's very bankrupt, and it really functions to me most of the time as a non-explanation. And the only reason I say that is because to more than a dozen fundamental questions, which I'm just going to pose to our viewers today, in these different areas, I really just don't see a powerful, persuasive, cogent explanation from the atheistic worldview. So here's the invitation. Some would maybe call it a challenge, but I'm just calling it simply an invitation to dialogue. If you are an atheist, or a naturalist, a materialist, a secular humanist, watching this video, and you're listening to these questions, these 18 or so questions I'm going to pose to you in just a little bit, what I'd like for you to do is not just answer to the video by a little, 1 or 2 sentence comment, some derisive, ad hominem, pejorative, insulting comment, which happens quite often on our website. And as you notice, we don't answer those type of comments. We just kind of leave them there and delete them after a while. But what I'd like you to do is this. if you as a viewer, as a rational, intelligent human being, which obviously I'm sure that you are if you're watching this video and you're thinking through these issues, what I'd like you to do is to try to take 2 minutes, 5, 10, 15 minutes, and just try to, as a representative, as an ambassador, let's say, of your worldview, of your philosophy, of your ideas, coming as an atheist, a naturalist, a materialist, try to give us, try to give me, try to give the YouTube channel and the Intelligent Faith 315 website the best explanation that you have, that to your understanding that you have of these fundamental issues of human experience. Because really, I just really think that this is at the heart of the debate, at the heart of the discussion, in terms of what kind of a worldview should we hold to. As we've mentioned before in prior videos, there's about 7 major worldviews out there. Let's see if I can remember them all together. There's theism, of course. There's atheism, deism, pantheism, panentheism, polytheism, and finite godism. Those are basically the summarization of the 7 major worldviews, the ways that you can look at reality and so forth. Now, each one of these worldviews, since it purports to be, it claims to be a view of the world, is supposed to answer the fundamental questions of human experience and human existence. Some people have summarized it by 4 questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. How well does your worldview, whatever it may be, whether you're a pantheist, an atheist, a deist, or a theist, how well does it answer that question? Origin, where do we come from? Morality, what is the true basis and grounding of right and wrong, of morality? Do you even believe in morality? Is it objective or subjective? What about meaning of life? Is there purpose, value to humanity as we walk through this life? And then, of course, the final one, destiny. How does your worldview answer this question of destiny? And so some philosophers, some thinkers have said that those are the 4 major questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, that a worldview must answer. And if it is a good worldview, if it has a lot of explanatory scope and explanatory power, it will give sufficient, good, compatible, comprehensive answers to those 4 questions. Now, other people say that there's more tests than that. Is your worldview livable? Is it able to be lived out consistently every day in your human experience without contradiction, without having to put it on the shelf when you step out your door? Is your worldview testable? Can you verify it by some means, some historical means or scientific means or philosophical or logical means? Is it verifiable? Other ones would be, is it logical? Is it comprehensive in the sense that does it violate any known laws of logic? Is it self-defeating? Is it self-contradictory? Are there logical impossibilities entailed within your worldview? So there's a lot of different questions that if we are thinking people, if we really care about the truth of the matter, then we will put our worldview to the test to see if it really can pass. Now, the only reason that we wouldn't do that, the only reason why maybe some of you watching this video will not answer this challenge, there could be a couple of reasons, of course, or invitation rather, not a challenge. An invitation to dialogue would be probably some of the following. A, you don't know the answers to these questions. You don't know what your worldview says about these different fundamental aspects of human experience. B, you do know the answers from your worldview, and you're not satisfied with them, but rather than admit that, you're just going to stick with your worldview because perhaps you don't want to think through the issues, you don't want to do a little more reading, a little more studying. That might be another possible reason for not answering this invitation to dialogue to my atheist friends. Or perhaps another reason would be this, and this would be the most sad of all responses, the sad of possibilities here. Listen to this. If you are going to hold to your worldview simply out of a prior commitment, a prior philosophical or a prior idealistic commitment to your worldview, and that is the reason why you don't want to engage in any further investigation, further research, further reading, challenging your own beliefs, challenging your own suppositions, putting these fundamental questions, using them as a litmus test, let's say, to your worldview, if you don't want to do that simply out of a prior intellectual commitment, let's say, to naturalism or materialism, if it's based out of a raw presupposition and commitment, then that is very sad. I really would feel bad for you. Because if that is the case, then you're really not a person interested in truth. You're not a person who is really interested at getting at the fundamental description of reality, the best that we can attain to that. And you don't want to ask hard questions. You don't want to do hard thinking and so forth. So I really just do encourage you to think about that. If you really are a person, if we really are people, and I trust that you are because you're watching this, unless we're people that are just trying to be, kind of silly and intellectually immature and go through YouTube and watch videos and throw out insulting comments, etc., unless we're like that, we should be the kind of people who really are in search of the truth. And most of my atheist friends would agree that it is a good thing, it is an honorable thing, it is a necessary thing to try to be in search of the truth and for the facts, the way that reality really is. And if that be the case, then whoever you are watching this video, these about 18 or so questions that we'll just briefly discuss and I'll put out there as an invitation to dialogue. Don't shy away from them. Don't be intimidated. Don't choose not to respond, but rather think through these issues, write them down, and I do encourage you, again, make a 5-minute, 10-minute, 30-minute video response. Post it, send me an email at jason@claycup.com or post it on YouTube as a response. Go on Intelligent Faith 315, and in the little question box there, you could send us the link to your video, and I promise you, we will post it on our YouTube channel, and or on our website, just so we can begin, hopefully, a good discussion about these 18 fundamental or so questions. And again, the reason I am putting these out there is because in my own journey, my own intellectual personal journey of 2 years in becoming a Christian, because I was not raised in a Christian home. I was a theist. I did believe in some type of a God for as long as I can remember, but was very unsure as to who God was and what is the true concept of God. Is that even real? Is that even true? Etc. In my own quest intellectually for the true identity of God and the truth of all of this, these are questions that you have to wrestle with and that I wrestled with, and I am convinced that I have come to the place in my own intellectual personal journey where the only worldview out of the 7 I mentioned that has sufficient explanatory power and explanatory scope and gives sufficient cohesive and logical answers to these questions, the only worldview is the Christian worldview, the Christian philosophy, the Christian faith. And so if you disagree with that, that's wonderful. That's fine. I'd love to hear a response from you, a dialogue. So hopefully this video would be maybe the catalyst for something like that. That hopefully if you are a naturalist, materialist, or atheist watching that, you're not going to be content to just write up a little insulting comment and use some foul language and so forth like sometimes does happen, but rather be a good representative, be a good ambassador, be a good voice for your worldview, your philosophy, your ideas, because after all, they are yours and you are hinging your life and your eternal destiny perhaps upon that, so stand up for it and express it and try to give the best cohesive, most cogent answer you can to some of these questions, rather than sitting back and just kind of quarterbacking, Monday quarterbacking the videos that we make. Do some work yourself and just produce a little video and engage with us in this friendly invitation to dialogue about these 18 or so fundamental issues to our human experience. I really do encourage you to do that. Okay, so now that I've talked for about 14 minutes, let me just put out some of these, throw out some comments related to these 18 fundamental questions or so, and then I'll just end it for today. You can think about it, make some notes, and produce a video with which we can engage in a dialogue. Okay, if you do not hold to the Christian worldview, I would encourage you to think about this question. Okay, how would you answer, for example, this first question? How do you explain the origin of the universe? Fundamental question. Again, if you hold to those 4 fundamental questions we talked about, origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, the origin of the universe is one of the most deepest and fundamental questions that you have to answer. And so, of course, when we say universe, we mean all of the created order, time, space, matter, and energy. Most of you, off the top of your head, would say Big Bang. Most of you, or some of you, would perhaps say multiverse. But of course, that's not really the ultimate answer there. If you say to the Big Bang, well then of course you have a couple of options there. Do you believe that somebody caused the Big Bang? Do you believe that it caused itself? that it was self-causing? Or do you believe perhaps that it came out of absolutely nothing? Do you think that aliens did it? Even if you give the multiverse answer, for example, well then I would rephrase the question and say, how did the multiverse come about? What was the origin of the multiverse? So I do encourage you to grapple with that question. It's very fundamental. And of course, in 2003, the Borg, Guth, and Vilenkin theory said, scientifically, mathematically, that any universe, even if it's a multiverse, which is, over the average course of its history, expanding, has to have a point of beginning, a finite time ago, and of course cannot be eternal. So what would your answer be to that? Would you say the universe is eternal? Would you disagree with the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem formulated in 2003? Would you say that, like Daniel Dennett does, that the universe performed the ultimate bootstrapping act and kind of actualized itself out of nothingness? That perhaps some other agent larger than the universe caused it? What would you say? You have to answer that question. What is the origin of the universe? But not just the origin of the universe, you also have to go beyond that. And once you come up with a good, comprehensive answer for that question, what about the fine-tuning of the universe? And when we say fine-tuning here, you could use the word design, although this is obviously highly complex design. But we're specifically asking here the fine-tuning of the universe mathematically. And when I say that, what I mean is we see certain forces at work in the universe, and when we quantify these mathematically, we assign to them certain mathematical values, which have to have a very precise order of specification. So let's say the force of gravity, the cosmological constant, the speed of light, etc. We usually refer to these as constants of nature. How do you explain the fine-tuning of the universe? The initial conditions of the Big Bang, they necessitate extreme fine-tuning. And how do you explain the fine-tuning that we do witness in the world today? And I know that most of you would throw out multiverse. You need to give me some independent evidence for the multiverse theory, because there really is none at all, which at that point, that's not really science. That's just a kind of philosophizing at the cosmic level. But how do you explain that? And some of you have even challenged us on the fact of whether the universe is finely tuned. And really, if you say that, you're not really reading at all. This really is a gigantic issue. This is a really problematic issue for the atheist, for the naturalist, for the materialist, because mathematically it's kind of incontestable. You can't really deny the fact that the universe is finely tuned for life, conscious, sentient, advanced life to appear. And if any one of these mathematical constants, and there's about 30 of them, if any of them were changed by about 1 part, and of course the numbers differ, but 1 part in 10 to the 40th, 1 part in 10 to the 80th, and yes, they have done the math, they have figured these out, then life would be impossible. Life would have been impossible. And it's not just the fine-tuning of each individual constant. There exists a precise ratio in between certain fine-tuning constants to the other ones. And even if that ratio were changed in the slightest degree, life would be impossible. And so, quite rightly so, many people call this the Goldilocks universe, because at the mathematical level, there is extreme fine-tuning. And many atheist thinkers, and I really respect them for this, they're very consistent and honest and open that this is a problem for the atheist. And so I do encourage you to think about that, and what does your worldview have to say? Because this doesn't have to happen by necessity. It didn't have to be this way. And if you figure out the odds of it happening, that has huge problems with it. And again, the universe, or even the multiverse, cannot have existed for eternity. The Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem shoots that down. And so if you don't have eternity to deal with anymore, then the chances of it happening randomly, accidentally, over a finite period of time are just incomprehensibly small. However, yet here it is. And so, kind of as a reference to the best explanation, it absolutely looks fine-tuned and designed for human life. And this, of course, is also called the anthropic principle, because it looks very much so that mathematically the universe was designed for human life, sentient life, conscious, complex life to make an appearance. So how do you explain the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe mathematically, and also the fine-tuning terrestrially? And by that I mean not just the conditions cosmically, let's say, universally in terms of mathematics, but there's also this other level of fine-tuning, which is terrestrial fine-tuning, the conditions within our own solar system and the construction of the Earth for habitability. And again, there's about 20 or 30 aspects here, everything from the thickness to the Earth's crust, to the strength of gravity, the thickness of the ozone layer, our Earth's magnetic field, etc., and the composition of water, the presence of liquid water on the Earth. Really is an interesting question. Of course, a great resource to check out for this, you could even look at it on YouTube, is The Privileged Planet, where Guillermo Gonzalez and Jay Richards do some really great, interesting work into the fine-tuning terrestrially of our planet to support complex, conscious observers, human beings. So, how do you explain the origin of the universe, Mr. Atheist, Naturalist, Humanist? Origin of the universe, fine-tuning mathematically, fine-tuning terrestrially of the Earth, also the fine-tuning biologically. In other words, the fine-tuning of living systems that we see. And so again, this of course is the design argument or the teleological argument. But you know, within the last 20 years or so, it's just absolutely astounding the level of information and complexity, specified irreducible complexity. Of course, irreducible complexity was coined by Michael Behe in his book Darwin's Black Box. But in living systems, we actually do find the presence of molecular machines. And this is not a word that we pull out of a hat. This is exactly what they are at the subatomic level, actual molecular machines that cut, build, break things, recycle things, etc. How do you explain fine-tuning biologically? The bacterial flagellum is a popular example of this. Cilia, the blood clotting system. All kinds of interesting molecular machines that do exist. How do you explain that on a purely random, accidental type of an evolutionary, atheistic, naturalistic worldview? There's a lot to be explained there. Because again, a lot of these have irreducible complexity, which is if you remove simply one part, it's completely non-functional and really serves no purpose at all and would have been deselected for by natural selection or evolution. Something, by the way, to keep in mind is that even if Darwinian evolution is true or were true, which I don't believe that it is, I don't believe that it holds water at all scientifically, believe in microevolution, but not macroevolution. But even if macroevolution were true, speciation, you would still need something, it appears to me, like a divine mind to account for the origin of the universe, because that's a huge question that must be answered, but also the fine-tuning mathematically. Even if evolution were true, you still have to grapple with that question, the origin of the universe at all. Why is there anything? And of course the contingency argument for God's existence comes in there. The fine-tuning mathematically, fine-tuning terrestrially, fine-tuning biologically, and at the deepest level that we know of, you must also give us a good explanation for the fine-tuning informationally. So, and by this we mean, of course, the presence of information, but specifically I'm referring to the 3 billion or so pairs of nucleotides in the DNA molecule. So, of course, you know that the DNA molecule is made up of a chemical language of 4 bases, A, C, T, and G, adenosine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine. And on this double helix structure kind of looks like a winding staircase of the DNA molecule with sugar backbone and phosphates with these nucleotide bases, A, C, T, and G. It is a chemical language. Let me say that again. It's not like a chemical language. It is a chemical language. Many scientists, non-Christians, have even said that just as a set of encyclopedias has book and then chapter and page and paragraph and sentence and wording, the same comparative breakdown can be done within the human genome. So I do encourage you to think through that issue, and you have to give an account for the fine-tuning of DNA, fine-tuning informationally, the presence of information. And of course this becomes very difficult to do on a materialistic, naturalistic worldview, because information is immaterial. The iron atoms, for example, on a floppy disk, or on a data stick, a pen drive, it's going to be the same either way, but the rearrangement of those atoms will result in information. The laws of physics can explain, for example, why ink holds to the newspaper, you know, the chemical laws of attraction and bonding and so forth, but there are no physical laws that we know of that can explain for how these molecules can be shepherded or moved around to convey information. And of course, a language system is precisely that, where two or more beings agree upon the meaning and the arrangement of symbols or characters, and then it's implemented. And then, of course, the fascinating thing we have discovered at the latter half of the 20th century was that we do indeed see biological information and language within the DNA molecule that must be accounted for. More than 1,000 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica, that amount of content is represented within the DNA molecule. 3 billion pairs of nucleotide bases. And if even just one of them is out of place, of course, this results in mutations, which are extremely harmful. They're not beneficial to life, as Darwinian evolution claims, but they're degenerative. And then, of course, to get more and more complex forms of life, you have to add information, not take away information. So, anyway, you must explain origin of the universe, fine-tuning mathematically, fine-tuning terrestrially, fine-tuning biologically, and fine-tuning informationally. If you have a persuasive, comprehensive, cohesive worldview, then you have to have a good explanation for that. And of course, the theistic worldview, the Christian worldview, in these areas is not based upon what we don't know. It's not a God of the gaps argument. Rather, it's based upon what we do know. And this, of course, is called an inference to the best explanation. We know that information and irreducibly complex specified design in our experience only comes from a mind, only comes from an intelligence. And we use this all the time in areas like cryptography. We use that same type of rationale in archaeology, when you find hieroglyphics and arrowheads and different objects, or mysterious statues on Easter Island where you don't know who carved them. The inference to the best explanation, we know that these complex, specified complex, irreducibly complex objects, especially language and information, always proceed forth from a mind. Books come from an author, and so you got to give a good explanation for those different fundamental questions. Let me check what my time is here. 27 minutes. Also, for your worldview, how do you explain the origin, not just of the universe and its fine-tuning features, but then what about the origin of certain laws, certain things that we do know and believe to be true, and we take advantage of it every day, but you have to stop for a second, and you have to realize that your worldview has to give a good explanation of certain laws in our universe. For example, mathematical laws. Where do mathematical laws come from? As an atheist, naturalist, materialist, how are you going to sufficiently account for the origin and the existence of mathematical laws? And even non-Christian philosophers of mathematics, they will tell you that mathematical laws are not something that we have invented. Rather, they are something that we have discovered. We haven't designed them, we have discovered them. And so, E equals mc squared, how to figure out the circumference of a circle, the Pythagorean theorem, etc. These are not formulas or equations that we have invented. Rather, we have discovered them, stumbled upon them, and they happen to be an actual mathematical law, a real feature, an objective feature of the reality that we inhabit. They happen to be hardwired, so to say, into our reality. How are you going to explain that as a naturalist, a materialist, an atheist? How do you account for mathematical laws? How do you account for logical laws? If you're watching this video and you are into this kind of material, I assume you are a logical person. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself the question, on an evolutionary basis, a naturalistic, materialistic worldview, how do you explain the existence of logic? As Dr. Alvin Plantinga has pointed out in his evolutionary argument against naturalism, evolution does not select based upon truth. It doesn't select based upon logical value or truth value. Evolution or natural selection, if it be true, it makes its selection based upon survivability. And so Charles Darwin even had great doubts and fears concerning this. One of Charles Darwin's most famous quotes is that sometimes at nighttime he would lay awake in a cold sweat, realizing that if his mental and cognitive functions have come from lower animals, why should he place any value in them at all? And so then, of course, the argument would go something like this, is that if your reasoning evolved from lower primates and truth value is not selected for, why should you believe in evolution if that's how your logical process has developed? It's not based upon truth or logic then. But, however, we do realize that logic does exist. And again, it's another aspect of reality. It is logically, it seems, logic is hardwired into reality. The laws of logic are actually real. And if you try to deny them, you have to use them in order to deny them. So, the law of identity, the law of the excluded middle, of course, the law of non-contradiction. These laws of logic, and there's about 10 or 12 of them, also called first principles, or foundationalism, if you want to use that term. But the laws of logic are an actual feature of our reality, guys. They really do work, and there seems to be a one-to-one correspondence between the way reality is really set up and the way that our brains or minds, because of course I believe in both, that we have the hardware, the brain, and the software, the mind. There seems to be a one-to-one correspondence with how my mind and brain can come into contact with these laws of logic, laws of mathematics. How do you explain that on a naturalistic, materialistic worldview? Because, of course, those aren't materialistic things. Those are immaterial, conceptual realities. So this, of course, is where the conceptual argument for God's existence comes in, which we've already posted on that. Do encourage you to Google the conceptual argument for God's existence. And you have to answer that question as well. The mathematical laws, the origin of the logical laws, and how about the origin of the physical laws of our universe? Again, if you're going to try to say that the creation of the physical laws of our universe originated simply by random accidental chance, that really doesn't hold any mathematical water, because the odds of it happening are really over impossibility. It goes beyond this mathematical barrier for impossibility, which I think is 1 times 10 to the 50th. It really becomes a non-explanation if you try to invoke chance there. If you think that it just happened out of nothingness, just like that, kind of like the ultimate bootstrapping act of the universe, well, that's worse than magic. That's kind of a metaphysically incoherent. But so you do have to answer that question as well. And of course, you can't invoke physical laws to explain physical laws because they didn't exist yet, right? So they couldn't be self-caused because they'd have to exist before they existed in order to make themselves exist. So how are you going to explain, if you are an atheist, a materialist, a naturalist, how are you going to explain the origin of mathematical laws, logical laws, and physical laws? Now, the theistic or the Christian worldview explanation for that is that these are eternal, immutable, necessary concepts, necessary truths, necessary ideas, and we find their source issuing forth from an eternal, immutable, necessary mind. Is that not where ideas come from? Is that not where, in our experience, because this is based upon what we do know, what we do observe in our universe, and of course even scientific reasoning is supposed to be based upon what we do know, what we do observe. Ideas, concepts, truths issue forth from minds. So if we do find the existence of eternal, immutable, necessary, unchanging concepts, ideas, or truths, such as the mathematical laws, logical laws, physical laws, they would have to issue forth from a divine, seemingly omniscient mind. So, give me your explanation of that. I would love to hear it. So, origin of the universe, mathematical fine-tuning, terrestrial fine-tuning, biological fine-tuning, informational fine-tuning, and DNA. Also, the origin of mathematical laws, logical laws, and physical laws. And then the origin of some other things that are just really thought-provoking to think about. For example, what is the origin of first life? Or to be more specific, how do you explain the origin of the first cell? Many people hold to Darwinian evolution without realizing that Darwinian evolution it only begins to be used as an explanation once life is present, once life is on the scene. But before life exists, there is no adequate theory for chemical evolution or anything of the sort. Stanley Miller and Harold Urey and all of that has just failed, and Alexander Oparin, a Russian, all of these attempts for chemical evolution absolutely have failed, and plus they don't even come into focus because Darwin's theory comes into effect once life is present. So even if you go into an atheistic, naturalistic, materialistic biology textbook, cell theory would tell you what? Cell theory says, well, Darwinian evolution is our explanation of how cells propagated, multiplied, and developed into all other forms of life after the first cell. But before the first cell, we don't know what happened. Modern-day cell theory, from a naturalistic point of view, a Darwinian point of view, has no explanation. It admits, it accepts the fact that it has no explanation for the origin of the first cell. Now, why is that the case? Well, it's because of one of the other aspects we talked about. The biological fine-tuning and the informational fine-tuning that is present within the so-called simple cell, and there are no simple cells, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely mind-blowing. It would be comparable to finding perhaps a gigantic USS Enterprise, the most advanced piece of computerized, automated machinery out in space floating around, and saying that it just got there randomly, accidentally through the eons of time, because the cell happens to be much more complicated than that. If you were to blow up a cell, a red blood cell, white blood cell, what have you, to the size of, let's say, a gigantic spaceship like USS Enterprise, the modern understanding of the cell, with all of its incredible molecular machinery that is irreducibly complex and specifically or specified complexity, is much more advanced than that. So how are you going to explain that? The origin of the first life, the first cell. It's going to be pretty hard to do on a naturalistic, materialistic level. And again, for me, that's why the atheistic worldview, the naturalistic, materialistic, humanistic worldview just doesn't work for me, because it's not powerful enough in terms of its explanatory scope or explanatory power. But not just the origin of first life or the first cell. What about the origin of human reason? Human reason. We do think that there is a difference between a pile of dirt, a pile of rocks, and human beings, do we not? I know we make that joke that, you're as dumb as a pile of rocks, but we really don't believe that, even the person that says that. We do possess, as Aristotle said, the difference between a human and an animal is that human beings are rational animals. We have ratio, we have reasoning, intellectual, cognitive powers. We can self-reflect. Another question, that what about the origin of human consciousness? This ability, this aspect of intentionality, and this ability to say I am, I exist, and to reflect upon ourselves. These are not things, ladies and gentlemen, that can simply be explained away by some chemical composition or anything like that at all. And of course, that hasn't even happened. We do, all of us, I would hold this opinion that we do all really agree in human reason. It really does exist, human reason and human consciousness. Because if we didn't, then there really would be no difference between throwing a rock off of a cliff and throwing a human off of a cliff just arbitrarily. Why would we object to that? I mean, if we're just molecules in motion, matter in motion, if we don't have reason really at all, then there really would be no difference in that. But of course, we all do agree that there is a difference in throwing a rock off a cliff or a little child off a cliff, okay? Humans, one of many things that sets us apart from inanimate objects or even animals is that we have reasoning, rational powers. Of course, animals are never going to be able to write novels, write a book, compose Mozart's Ninth Symphony, what have you. And one of the reasons why is because we have this capacity to reason, and we are conscious. We are self-aware. We can reflect about ourselves. So how do you explain that? Origin of first life, cell, origin of human reason, origin of consciousness, or what about the origin of morality? Again, if you want to compare human beings with a pile of dirt, a pile of rocks, if a rock rolls down a mountain and hits you on the toe, hits you on the foot, you're not going to get mad at the rock because you know that a rock is not a moral agent. However, if you're walking down the street and a human being punches you in the face, well, you are going to get mad at a human being. Because we do, contrary to what we say sometimes in academia or from perhaps a university pulpit or lectern, we do believe that human beings are moral agents. We do believe that human beings have the ability to choose, even if you believe in extreme determinism, and if you do believe in hardcore Darwinian evolution, atheism, naturalism, materialism, it would seem to me that you would have to believe in extreme determinism, even though you're choosing to believe determinism as opposed to not believing in it. But how are you going to explain the origin of morality? And again, if there is at least one aspect of morality that is objective, if there is one thing in morality that is absolutely, universally, always wrong for all people at all times and all places, for example, torturing little babies for fun and then eating them, if there's at least one aspect of morality that is universally, objectively wrong, it would seem that that objectively universal moral law would have to then issue forth from a moral lawgiver. And this, of course, is the moral argument, the axiological moral argument. C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest Christian thinkers, who was an atheist, became a Christian on the basis of this. Because our moral experience is something that we're very much in touch with. And I would encourage you to look on our channel, YouTube channel, or the website, and watch the 3 videos we produced on the moral argument, and read some of William Lane Craig's information about the moral argument, or read C.S. Lewis's book Mere Christianity on the moral argument. How do you explain the existence of morality? And though some of us may give lip service and we may say we don't believe in any morality, which is nihilism, that really isn't true, because if someone broke in their home and tried to cannibalize or rape their family in front of them, they would of course say that was wrong. So nihilism doesn't hold water. And then relativism is equally defeatable, because if you think that everything is relative, then you could never say that another being was actually truly wrong. And so again, I could break into your home and I could eat your children in front of you, and you wouldn't really be able to say that was objectively morally wrong, which of course that's reprehensible. That's just unthinkable. So I know that most of my friends, thank God, naturalists, materialists, atheists, do believe in the existence of morality. And most of them, I think, even think it's objective. But the question is, or rather the point is, they have no real grounding or sufficient reason for that. And so that's something that needs to be dealt with. How do you explain the origin of morality? Okay, origin of the universe. Fine-tuning mathematically, fine-tuning terrestrially. How do you explain fine-tuning biologically, fine-tuning informationally? How do you explain the origin of mathematical laws, origin of logical laws, origin of the physical laws? How do you explain the origin of the first cell? How do you explain the origin of human reason, the origin of human consciousness, or the origin of morality? And then finally, how do you explain on your worldview, and this now is kind of a psychological question, or you could say a question relating to our experience. I'm at 43 minutes, so I need to hurry now. How do you explain meaning, value, and purpose in life? Okay, now this gets into something else. I know that naturalists, materialists, atheists believe that life does have meaning, value, and purpose, obviously. But if there is no existence beyond this life, if there is no immaterial aspect to humanity, if there is no soul, if there is no mind, if there is no afterlife, if there is no God, you may be able to try and construct temporary meaning as a human, but do you realize that there would then be no ultimate meaning in life? Ultimately, everything would be meaningless. You might be able to find, some temporary meaning in watching a movie for 2 hours, but ultimately it is meaningless. Ultimately, it just means nothing. Whether you discover cancer, the cure for AIDS, whether you achieve even world peace or something of that nature, as Bertrand Russell said, it must all eventually come collapsing down. And so Bertrand Russell suggested that we all live courageously with a philosophy of unyielding despair, that all of the achievements of humanity will eventually come crashing down and be covered in cosmic dust and rubble. And the sun will burn out, everything will cease to exist, all heat will dissipate, and that will be just absolute annihilationism eventually. How do you explain your outlook on life? Because most of you would probably say that life does have ultimate meaning. But my point is that you're inconsistent, it would appear to me, with the atheistic, naturalistic, or materialistic worldview. If you say that your worldview has ultimate meaning, it really doesn't. It may have some temporary meaning, but your life has no ultimate meaning. Your children's life has no ultimate meaning. Your friend's life has no ultimate meaning. What about ultimate value? You may try to invent some kind of value, but honestly, if we're just molecules in motion, according to the atheistic, naturalistic, materialistic worldview, if you are consistent, and I think most naturalists and materialists are not consistent, they don't follow through with what they believe, but if you really did follow through with it, then what you would have to agree with is that a beautiful 1-year-old baby is of the same worth as a mosquito. And just like you could squash a mosquito, you could equally squash a 1-year-old baby. And this is why I think throughout history, without a doubt, the most horrendous massacres of the world have been perpetrated by atheistic regimes. Now, atheists do a lot of great things, but I am just saying that an atheistic, materialistic, naturalistic philosophy, if you are consistent and if you follow it through to its logical conclusion, will allow you to be like that because, of course, there exists no absolute truth, there exists no absolute morality, and there exists no ultimate value for anything or anyone, and so you're justified in doing that. I know that sounds horrible, and I'm glad everybody doesn't live like that. I'm glad that most of you as atheists don't live like that. All I'm trying to get you to see is that if you were consistent, if you were to follow your worldview, your ideas, your philosophy through to its logical conclusion, that is how atheism, materialism, and naturalism ends up as a worldview. Okay? It would result in the loss of ultimate meaning, ultimate value, and of course ultimate purpose. There would be no ultimate purpose to life at all. Because again, whatever you would accomplish, there's just no purpose for anything. It's meaningless, it's absurd, and this is why some atheists who have really, in a sense, been intellectually courageous and embraced this, that's why they've become existentialists. You know, they know that life is absurd, meaningless, according to their worldview, like Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, Friedrich Nietzsche. A lot of these guys, though I think that they were wrong, at least they were consistent with what they taught somewhat, and at least they were brave enough, so to say, to follow it through to conclusion, and they realized that, you know, according to that way of looking at reality, life was really just absurd because it results in a loss of ultimate meaning, ultimate value, ultimate purpose. And ladies and gentlemen, the Christian people throughout history absolutely have perpetrated some bad crimes. Crusades, Salem witch trials, absolutely. And I'm not making any excuse for that at all. Our argument would be that those people, they don't really genuinely know the Christ of the Bible and the one true God. But nonetheless, that in the name of Christ, the name of religion, period, absolutely horrible things have happened. But just in the 20th century alone, how could you possibly really compare that with Stalin, Lenin, and Mao Zedong, these atheistic regime dictators who, those three alone, the big three, perpetrated the mass murder of 110 million people. As someone has once said, that is a mountain of bodies and rivers of blood, simply because their atheistic, naturalistic, evolutionary philosophy allowed them to do so. So that's really problematic, and so it would result, have you ever considered that? What are your thoughts on that? That your worldview does really logically, by the end of it, result in the loss of ultimate meaning, value, and purpose. I know you're going to try and invent it temporarily for the 2 hours or 2 days, but ultimately, you have no meaning, have no value, have no purpose. But of course, if you do believe, and if you believe there is evidence for and proof that points towards an ultimate existence, a reality beyond this life, then of course, that wouldn't be the case. There would be ultimate meaning, value, and purpose. that would be present. So give me your thoughts on that. And finally, would you say that your worldview is livable? Because to me, the atheistic worldview, naturalistic, materialistic, humanistic worldview is not livable, at least consistently, for the same reasons I just got done explaining. Because when you go out your door and you're going to get into certain situations through life, you are going to have to, even if you don't realize it, you're going to have to set aside your worldview in certain situations. You're not supposed to believe in objective morality, but you'll behave as if you do at times. You're not supposed to believe in absolute truth, but you will at certain times. There are certain things that, according to your worldview, you shouldn't practice them, but you're going to borrow it from the theistic worldview, and you will practice them from time to time. So in other words, your worldview, it's not livable in that sense to me, okay? It is going to result in a type of a world, if it's lived out consistently, fully, and to the end, comprehensively, it will result in an unlivable type of an existence. Ultimate meaning, ultimate value, ultimate purpose will be lost. And this is why the French atheist existentialist thinker Albert Camus said that the greatest philosophical question, if the atheist is consistent, the greatest philosophical question that an atheist must deal with every morning when he wakes up is, why not commit suicide? So I'm just saying that if you're consistent, it does become an unlivable worldview. A loss of morality, a loss of truth, it does really become unlivable. Secondly, compatible. Is your worldview compatible? In other words, when you go out of your house and you face the world every day, does your worldview, your description of reality, your description of the world, of life, of the universe, does it match up with the way that we really perceive the way things are? And again, to me, the atheistic, naturalistic, materialistic worldview is incompatible. You can't believe in order. You can't really believe in ultimate design and absolute truth, absolute morality. It's incompatible, but yet you're going to somehow practice that at some point during your life. The atheistic professor, the materialistic professor who gets up on his university podium and he preaches this message that there is no such thing as absolute morality, absolute truth, he's going to go home and he is going to tell his children at nighttime, that it is absolutely true that he absolutely loves them. And so though he would proclaim with his lips that he doesn't believe in absolute morality or absolute truth, he's going to live with his life that he actually does. And so this is the kind of conundrum that we get into, is that, to me, the atheistic, materialistic, naturalistic worldview is highly, highly incompatible, for example, with the existence of mathematical laws, logical laws, physical laws, with fine-tuning on multiple levels. You would expect to find none of this in an atheistic, naturalistic worldview. Why should there be anything at all then? Nothingness can't actualize itself, but yet supposedly everything came out of just pure nothingness. How does that even happen? How does it even work? That seems kind of incoherent to me. So how do you explain the unlivability, the incompatibility, and finally, the illogical nature, it seems to me, of atheism? Because atheism, it really just is that statement, that belief that there is no God. But that seems to me to be illogical, because you couldn't ever really state that without what? Without possessing absolute, complete, comprehensive knowledge of everything, everywhere, in the universe, and possibly beyond. But then, of course, you would fulfill the definition of what? Of God. And so it doesn't even seem to me that atheism really is that logical. It really does seem self-defeating. Relativism, agnosticism, skepticism, postmodernism, they all do have logical problems at the most basic level to me. They're self-defeating, self-contradictory, and self-stultifying. So how would you address some of those logical issues, those illogical problems with that worldview? It really does seem quite difficult to me. And keep in mind, again, it's not that one of these or a couple of these need to be answered. Really, if your worldview is going to have a comprehensive, persuasive, kind of a cogent, coherent explanation explanation or explanatory power as a worldview, you need to try to give sufficient quality answers to all of these 18 or so fundamental questions. And there are more, but again, these are the questions. What is the origin of the universe on your worldview? How do you explain the fine-tuning mathematically, fine-tuning terrestrially, fine-tuning biologically in living systems, fine-tuning informationally in DNA? The origin of mathematical laws, the origin of logical laws, and physical laws. How do you explain the origin of the first cell or first life? How do you explain the origin of human reason, human consciousness? How do you explain the origin of morality, of objective morality? How do you explain the fact that according to your worldview, if you're consistent, it results in an absolute loss of ultimate meaning, ultimate value, and ultimate purpose? And then how would you address the statement that it does seem like your worldview ultimately seems to be unlivable, incompatible with reality, and illogical? If you're consistent, if you follow it through, if you are honest, it does seem to be the case. So these are just some basic tests for the atheistic, materialistic, naturalistic, or humanistic worldviews. And I really just do invite you guys to dialogue with me. Again, I'm not looking for a 1 or 2 sentence quick little response. You know, my 5-year-old son could probably do that. But really just looking for a couple of you, because I know not many of you will take me up on this invitation to dialogue, but if you do believe in what you say you believe, if you do really think that it's true, if you do really think that it describes reality comprehensively, completely, if your worldview really does hold explanatory power and explanatory scope, then in a sense, I do encourage you to put your money where your ideas are and just produce a video that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes long, and try and address as many of these questions as you can with some good explanation behind them. I really would just encourage you to do that. Please keep in mind, we're not going to post anything that's profane, pejorative, silly. This is a conversation for adults. This is a conversation for people that are thinking these issues through and really want to open up a dialogue. So again, any of you that are intellectually courageous enough to begin an open, visible dialogue to perhaps a couple thousand people, I do invite you to post up a couple of videos and answer some of these questions and help us understand why your worldview is superior to, is better than, has more explanatory power and explanatory scope than the Christian worldview or the theistic philosophy. If you can't do that, if your worldview cannot sufficiently pass these tests, then I would encourage you, it's time to get a new worldview. It's time to get a new philosophy about life. And I would encourage you to consider the Christian worldview. So that's all we have for this time. We'll see you next time, and until then, have an intelligent faith.